Welcome to another episode of Steady Lads. That intro does not get old, so we're pretty pumped up right now. Justin, I know you've been traveling as well. What have you been doing?
Yeah, I'm actually fortunate enough to stay local. So the All In Summit for All In podcast listeners, which was a little bit of an inspiration for this show, held a summit here in Los Angeles. Brian Armstrong gave an amazing talk yesterday. We had some other notable speakers. Elon Musk spoke. Um, Ray Dalio spoke. It was just a great experience. I was fortunate enough to run into some Steady Lads listeners. I actually met a Jordy, Thicky, and Tyke Maxi, respectively. I didn't meet a Justin Brand Maxi, but for those that said hi, if you're watching this, it was a pleasure meeting you. It was great meeting folks in the blockchain and crypto space. Unfortunately, the crypto sector was overly represented by scammers. So I did run into a hex scammer, called him out in person at a party, which I'm proud of.
Did he respond that he's in the arena, so like you should back off, or what did he say?
His response was interesting. He basically sort of said, "Well, isn't everything a Ponzi when you think about it?" And the way he legitimized. So he has a business card that's like a poker chip. I'll try to bring it later and show everyone. But yeah, he was like, I was like, so why do you think Hex is legitimate? And his whole thing was well, like, I just pitched Brad Gerstner on Hex, and I was like, oh my god, you're just totally misrepresenting our industry, just making us look like fools.
Yeah, he's like using the Richard Hart playbook, comparing things to Bitcoin. Well, what's the difference with Bitcoin? If you're okay with Bitcoin, then you should be okay with this thing. It's the same thing. Good luck to him.
I did want to run a little trivia. I'm curious, do any of you on this right now know who this is that I have a picture with? It's kind of a nerdy question. I can start giving hints.
It looks like Nouriel Rubini in like 10 years.
That's new real. That's Rubini when Bitcoin hits 100K.
Once Bitcoin hits 100K, this is what Nouriel Rubini is going to look like.
No, I guess no one knows. Okay, so this is Stephen Wolfram. So if you've ever used Wolfram Alpha, this is the guy. He gave a talk as well. He's a pretty nice fellow, always at the parties, having a good time. So
You recognize him immediately, Justin?
I didn't know who he was. Well, I knew who he was. I didn't recognize him. He gave a talk, and then I know the name Wolfram, right? So I wanted to say hi.
So I have a little conference picture selfie as well, but I'll leave that for the end of the show so our viewers can hold on for that one. Meanwhile, obviously, it's been a bit more volatility in the market. I think a bit more downside, but maybe we're steadying. I'm definitely concerned, and I know you're concerned, Tiki. I want to look at this issue of the overhang supply and what's going on with the FTX estate. I know you've been looking at it closely.
Yeah, but I've been looking very closely at like the amount of supply hitting the market over the next 1 or 2 quarters, and like my takeaway is that like things aren't looking so good. Just in terms of the supply side, um, obviously like the FTX estate on the 24th of August announced that they were going to start liquidating all their assets at around $100 million a week, and they had roughly $600 million of BTC and ETH. They have around $400 to $500 million of Grayscale trusts, and they have $1 billion of Sol and like $300 to $500 million of associated alts.
Let's talk about that $1 billion of flow quickly, because like that seems to be such a huge number compared to the liquidity for altcoins. I mean, $1 billion is I don't know what price somebody would get if they tried to execute that, in a week or in a couple of weeks.
Like, what do you think it's possible for? I also heard like discussions on Twitter around like creating like a governance proposal to just burn FTX Sol holdings. Like, do you think that has legs? Like, do you think that's like acceptable by crypto standards, or do you think it's like what do you guys think about that?
Super interesting. Yeah, there is a lot of examples actually, not just them, of companies that lost tokens to FTX and that could just get super dumped on, especially the ones that had certain agreements with FTX as to how, when those tokens would get sold or what were their, specs around the purchase that FTX made. And those ones maybe have a bit more of a say. But these people in charge of the estate have a lot of firepower behind them legally, and they will be like blasting lawsuits to anybody who tries to prevent them from their access to selling.
Yeah, I agree. And also like I think from like an ethical standpoint, it would be fine if it like belonged to just FTX and SPF, but I mean at the end of the day, this money belongs to the creditors, which is like, just like people like you and me. So cutting them out of something like this might not be, the most reasonable thing to do.
But yeah, going back to my question, like $1 billion of Solana seems like, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I can see it, depending on how it's executed, being a single digit shitcoin. I mean, it could get there. I'll love to Solana family, but um, they put a lot of the tokens in the wrong hands, and if someone's going to liquidate it in any period of time that's less than a year, I'm not sure where the selling pressure is going to go.
Yeah, I feel like it's similar to like the curve situation, um, where we all know that Mitch has like a big supply of CRV, and no matter what you think like the fair value of CRV is going to be, like there's CRV is like not catching a bid, and it's back to like the 40 cent OTC price, and I feel like it's more of like a supply demand question where if you know that there's this much supply, like that's going to hit the markets eventually, then like why would I buy? That's kind of like because crypto is so based on like sentiment and psychology that I have like no inclination to like even touch Sol, like aside from like a short-term trade.
I mean, let's look at. I mean, think you compare it to CRV. So CRV, he managed to raise, I don't know, 45, 50 million
Mhm.
on a token that was also worth, I don't know what the market cap was at the time, but it's like in the billion,
It's like
single digit billions, right?
it was like 5 to 8 million, so around like 5 to like 12% of the supply was sold OTC.
Okay. So with Solana, like, what's your expected impact on that?
Yeah, so I mean, there are estimates on like most of it's actually locked until 2027 or 2028. So there's actually only maybe 200 million of like free circulating supply that can be sold into the markets today, which makes it a little bit better. But yeah, 200 million is quite a bit of money, and it might have like a like a nonlinear effect on how it affects markets.
So you think the locked tokens do not get sold, or you think they get sold OTC to VCs, or what do you expect?
So the Solana Foundation actually has to like they've done this before where they actually have to manually like unlock the tokens so they can be transferred for locked tokens. I think they did it with Jump before. So it seems like Solana Foundation has to agree to like allow this sale for it to happen. So it's unclear whether they allow it or not because they could just say like, no, you have to keep it, and when it unlocks, that's when you can sell it and transfer it.
So do you actually think we're gonna possibly see the opposite reaction that the market might be expecting? Because I do feel like these pre-telegraphed moves in some ways get priced in, or like the pessimism has already, like everyone knows this is going to happen. It's not news, right? Of course there's some like debate over whether it actually happens, and to your point, if Solana lets it happen. But are you possibly like taking the other side of the trade and swimming upstream here?
I think in trad markets, like it's a bit more efficient and they price it in better. But I think in crypto, especially this year, time and time again, like it's just so dumb. I just feel like these things actually just get sold and people get dumped on, and the price goes down like pretty much as you'd expect them to.
Yeah, there's like no like capital, right? Like there's so much limited capital, so little like capital left in the markets that if there's even like $50 million with the sell pressure for a particular token, it's just like there's like no way for the markets to absorb that. So I do think it's gonna like go down. But like there might be like squeezes here and there, but I just expect like tokens like CRV and like Sol to like just slowly grind down until there's like some huge catalyst, like maybe Solana, like their phone takes off, or there's like some mass consumer app that launches on Solana, like some gaming app. Until that happens, I just like don't really see like a sustainable bid for like these types of like heavily inflationary tokens.
So Jordy and Thicky, can you guys walk us through what you think would happen? Let's assume the creditors receive these tokens and they do want to sell. Would they find an OTC buyer, sell it like a very significant discount, and then that OTC buyer would slowly sell over the course of, let's say, 30 days? Like, what do you guys expect would happen here?
We've had multiple instances of OTC purchases happening. We saw the Sui thing that happened, which was, in my opinion, one of the most absurd OTC sales, because it literally launched the next day at 10x the price that they had done the deal at. But these creditors don't really seem to be very sophisticated. We talked about the 3AC creditors who just let the Starkware warrants expire, even though if they spent 50K, they would have gotten 50 million worth of warrant um, value. So the sophistication is very low. They're very aggressive legally. We saw what happened to Layer Zero, which was shocking to me. They are going after them in all kinds of ways because they tried to rebuy their equity from FTX as it was collapsing.
Yeah.
So it's hard to predict. Sad reality is they're trying to, maximize their fees and make things as complicated as possible. It's sad, it's ultimately, it's not PvP, it's like PvL. You got the lawyers crushing the players, and it's very one-sided.
So Jordy, you're thinking, would either of you guys be like, uh, would it be in your interest to like be reaching out to the creditors? And I'm curious, Jordy, if like Selene Capital is looking into this at all, like trying to reach them, saying, I don't know, maybe if it's true, like you're willing to buy Sol at a very large discount and swap out over the next X amount of time. Is that something you're looking into, or?
So there's a few tokens that I could be interested in, like DYDX. There's some locked DYDX tokens that some of the creditors have. That's potentially interesting at the right price. I think for tokens that already have a price, it's harder. For things that are equity, for things that haven't like fully listed and that are fully liquid, you can potentially get a steal. But yeah, it's not a space that I'm looking at too actively.
Yeah, I think with regard to the OTC, so Galaxy is going to be the one that's going to be like acting as an agent for these sales, and I'm sure they have like an extensive network of people that are willing to buy this OTC. But I do think that like these OTC buyers will, when you're buying OTC, you always want to buy the last tranche and not the first one, because if you buy the first one, then they're just going to sell it in an open market and you'll instantly just eat a loss. So I think like we will see market selling before we see, the OTC side take the last bit of the clip. And as I was saying earlier, like you're still taking on a trade when you buy these things OTC. So like you still have to have some reasonable sort of, estimation that the path going forward is going to be good. And there's so much alt supply. It's not just Sol with $1 billion. There's Aptos with like a 250, $300 million unlock. There's DYDX with a huge cliff in December, and then there's Dots with like a $450 million, amount unlocking soon. And when those things happen, people have to sell alts and they have to sell their ETH and BTC in order to buy these tokens that are like having a massive supply come onto the market. So I think it'll drag the entire thing down. It just makes it kind of tough to buy alts right now until all these overhangs have cleared.
Can I ask you both a question on this note? So I see a lot of sentiment in this space that insiders basically short perps, and that's how they exit their holdings or pseudo exit their holdings without actually being unlocked and able to sell. And I've all sort of like adopted the position now that you can't really, quote unquote, beat the market in that way, right? Like you're still, when you short the perp, you're still making a trade and like having an opinion on where things will go, and you're paying the funding rate. Do you think there's even potentially a way to buy this Sol OTC and hedge your position adequately through perps, or is it just not feasible due to funding rates, volatility, etc.?
It's definitely not feasible right now. Maybe in the bull market, you could, do a large. I know for a fact that some of the large VCs were doing that in the bull market. But right now, with the liquidity and the funding rates, good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally had a, option to reach out and buy a bunch of Curve, right, and buy it at 40 cents and wait for 6 months, like, or do a handshake agreement, like these guys did. The reason I didn't do it, I just don't really have confidence that you can put on this trade, even if you hedge it on perps and are paying negative funding rate. I guess I've been proven correct. I just didn't want to touch it. I think trying to play that game without having full awareness of how exactly you will hedge and how much it's going to cost is a pretty bad idea.
I just pulled this tweet up. I thought it was very interesting. We talked about this on the pod as soon as the deal was struck, and I think we were all a little skeptical that this would work out for the purchasers. I do think a lot of the people that bought Curve OTC were doing it as sort of like a marketing effort for their brand in the space, like our His Excellency Justin Sun, and not necessarily trying to profit here, but you can see here based on this chart, as Taiki mentioned earlier, Curve is now at about 40 cents, maybe just slightly below it. I haven't checked recently in the last few days. But now everyone is underwater. Presumably they could have hedged a little bit with the perps, but I doubt it, right? That must have been an extremely crowded trade. So really interesting. And it sounds like, Jordy, you had the right intuition.
I was gonna say like, I mean, as Jordy said, like when liquidity was much better, like even in 2022, funding was persistently negative because people were, hedging unlocks, especially like VCs. But nowadays, like if you look at Aptos, for example, there's like $70 million of OI, but there's a $200 million, unlock coming in 3 months. Like there's just no feasible way someone could actually hedge that amount with perps without like, and funding's already like negative 40% a year. So if you wanted to hedge that full amount, it'd probably be like max funding negative, and it'd just be totally unfeasible.
Definitely. I mean, I'm curious what will turn this around. When do we feel like there's going to be another bull market? Probably next year's earliest, right? Bitcoin halving, maybe.
Yeah, this is like a question that I wanted to ask like everybody. Like there's this meta or like there's like this understanding that, you know, every 4 years crypto just pumps because of the halving. But I think as there are more halvings, the effect of this like the disinflationary supply becomes less and less. And do you actually think that the next halving can catalyze a bull market, or do you think it's going to be something else? And what do you think is like the probability that like Bitcoin sees all time highs in 2024 and 2025, and like, you know, coinciding with like that 4 year cycle?
So I traditionally don't believe I don't believe that the halving can have that big of an impact, going from 2% to 1% inflation. I think everyone's sort of on the same page there that's following this, that it's more narrative driven. And we can kind of see this with ETH, right? ETH over the last 2 years has drastically changed the supply dynamics with 1559 and the merge. And you never know what the other outcome would have been if that didn't happen. Maybe ETH would be massively down BTC, but we've already seen it hasn't really outperformed BTC, and there's something going on that's much more than just supply dynamics and tokenomics. So I think we're all here probably on the same page that the actual supply increase change or supply decrease is not really that relevant. It's just a narrative. And for me, like fundamentally, it's very hard for me to get excited about the idea that the narrative will stick when the fundamentals aren't there. And so I don't think the halving is really relevant, but I think some of the other things happening in our space, like the ETF that we've sort of talked about to death now, as well as regulatory clarity coming in the next couple of years, as well as like other innovations. I think that's what will trigger it. I think the halving is just sort of like coincidentally there.
I think from like a pure flows perspective, like at 2% a year of inflation, Bitcoin is around, I don't know, $5 to $7 billion of emissions a year. So if you have it, that's like another three, you can view it as like $3 billion of inflows. And it really depends on how much you model like the ETF inflows will be. Like if you think that's going to be like 10 billion or 15 billion, then you can estimate that from a pure flows perspective, like a halving is worth maybe a third or a fifth of an ETF approval.
I do think it's still significant from 2% to 1%. I would disagree that we're already there. I agree that by the next one, going from one to half, and then after that going to half to quarter becomes less important. But the other thing I would note that I had an interesting conversation with Ola from Polychain, and he has seen a lot of cycles very closely for many years, and he just said it so calmly that crypto is just so reflexive that it's very natural that we get these 4 year cycles just purely based on people all exiting together and all entering together, and this sort of wave taking around 4 years is quite a normal amount of time. Even if there was no Bitcoin halvening, I think we would still see a similar amount of time between people getting excited and overdoing it and then kind of getting completely wiped out and starting from scratch and rebuilding that hype. So I do think next year will be a big year once the overhang comes out, and there's like a free supply opportunity. I think we can have a pretty big halvening period, which isn't to say that the halvening will be all of the reason behind it, but it will help actually right now.
Yeah, and I think one thing to keep in mind is that I think the traditional media, like Bloomberg, CNBC, they're all conditioned to like cover Bitcoin halvings every 4 years, and they all have like these like pundits talk about, oh yeah, like like I'll buy Bitcoin in at the bottom, like at the 4 year cycle, and I'll sell it like when it gets high. And I think it's something that people expect, and it is narrative driven. But I do think that it's like if it is reflexive and everyone's entering, everyone's like going out at the same time, like maybe it does like have an effect. Like, do you guys think like it's possible for Bitcoin to peak out before the halving and then just like kind of wither away, or do you think it's going to be like Jordy, right? Like you said it's going to be a big year. Like, do you think the halving's going to be held in news like it was in 2020, and then we're going to see like a massive run up in Q3, Q4 into like 2025? Is that kind of like the shape of the cycle that you think will happen?
So yeah, and this is going with what Justin, back to what Justin was saying, where like the ETH upgrades this year would cause ETH to turn deflationary and like reduce a lot of supply coming in the markets. And this was a huge narrative going into 2023 that like ETH BTC would do really well. And we saw like a big pump of 10% that instantly got faded, after a month. And then into the upgrade, we also saw another. That's the second blue box. We saw another 10% pump that got faded, And then the month after, we saw another 10% pump that got faded again. I mean, at the end of the day, like with the ETH upgrade, it was just like people who are crypto native that really care about this, but maybe there wasn't enough money to sustain a pump. And the big question for this Bitcoin happening is like, it does seem like a more of a compelling story to like new money as opposed to just crypto native money. But the biggest question is like, will it sustain? Will it continue?
I just realized that I haven't seen anybody talk about the ETH BTC chart in like a year or two. It was all I was seeing, like in all my Telegram chats, everywhere on Twitter, ETH BTC charts and people, Kane, everybody talking about it's going to break out or it's going to do this. And no one's talking about it right now, which makes me think it's more interesting because Ethereum for me has always been not money. It's a community money. It's a new form of money that we haven't really seen before. Well, Bitcoin maybe is a little bit more of a gold and hard money. Ethereum, I've coined this phrase a while ago. It's like community money, and in a sense, if the community's poorer, people are having to sell coins just to maintain their project and get runway for all the things that they're building, and they have their personal wealth and their treasuries, everything in ETH. So maybe that's part of the reason why the chart has been going down despite the disinflationary advantage.
I just want to point out, I mean, it's so tough to say, right? Because in 2018 and 19, ETH BTC went down to, I think, between 0.01 and 0.02. It's 4 to 5x higher than that now. It's about at 0.06. So it's so tough to say if, the tokenomics change and the supply change could have had a huge impact, and ETH would have been down so much worse relative to BTC if that didn't happen. Or the flip side is like it was a nothing burger. The moderate differences in supply, 1 to 3% here and there, doesn't actually matter, and the narrative matters more. So I'm still on the fence of if the supply change for ETH actually did anything. Obviously, we'll never know, but yeah, super interesting.
Like what you said, Jordy, was really interesting to me. It's like maybe ETH as like the barometer of like the net worth of like the average crypto individual. That kind of makes sense, to be honest. I think a lot of people in crypto. I feel like if you enter when you first enter crypto, you get in because of Bitcoin, and then you discover ETH, and then you kind of like can't get out of that rabbit hole. And a lot of people denominate their portfolio or their net worth in ETH. So if people are making money, then they'll rotate profits not into USDC or Tether, but into ETH. So if everyone's losing money, then it makes sense for ETH, BTC to like just go down only. And if we're going to see mass unlocks for alts, like maybe ETH BTC is going to just keep grinding down, and it's going to take some huge catalyst to take us out.
This is something that we've modeled quantitatively. If you regress like the returns of altcoins versus like Bitcoin and ETH, like the amount of returns that ETH explains over Bitcoin is like 2 to 3x higher. It's altcoins are mostly have a correlation to ETH as opposed to Bitcoin. So this community money thesis makes sense.
I'm ultimately like very bullish both of those. I think the demand will eventually hugely outstrip the supply. We're not quite there yet. I think it's going to take some time for, as we've talked about, the absorption of the supply first and eventually the new demand to come out. And for the demand, we just need people to start by being comfortable with holding their wealth digitally. And even that basic thing hasn't fully happened. All the hacks that we're still seeing are scaring off people. I think we need, first of all, very simple account abstraction for seed phrases, wallets, custody. These things need to get a lot more safe and a lot simpler. And secondly, we need the kind of products that will bring people in and make it sustainable, but also, worthwhile for them to keep their money online. Obviously, RWAs are a hot topic, and I think getting good products and good yield online is something that will make people more comfortable with holding their financial lives on chain. And once they do that, there's a lot more liquidity, a lot more accessibility to buy ETH, to buy Bitcoin, to buy like another token.
Yeah, I think I was listening to a podcast with Tushar Jain from Multicoin, and he said that he doesn't think that DeFi or NFTs can enter like the next sustainable bull market until people are being paid on chain. And I think this trend towards like consumer apps, like with Friend.Tech, and maybe having other creators on board, things like Friend.Tech, denominating some of their income in Ether, maybe that's going to compel them to create digital wallets, maybe save some money into Aave or buy RWA stablecoin like tokenized treasuries, and yeah, it's something that I'm like really closely tracking. I think the 2017 and the 2021 cycle was led by mass hyper speculation, and I think the average retail participant is like just tired of like Ponzonomic elements. And I think if we're going to see like the next bull market, we have to see like a couple dozen consumer apps that people actually use on a daily basis that actually affect like the livelihood of people in the real world.
Another thing we're hoping to see for another bull market is a little steadier regulation. Right now, we're seeing all kinds of lawsuits all over the place. I mean, the SEC has been losing a bunch, which is good. They've definitely, in my opinion, been crossing the boundary of what's reasonable, but we're still seeing crazy lawsuits, and sometimes against what we've talked about as being not necessarily like evil players. And one more NFT lawsuit after the one we talked about last time. There's Stoner Cats, which I remember was Ashton Kutcher and Vitalik doing some cartoons. So apparently, this is something that we have to make sure that we enforce. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I missed. I just shared the tweet here. I missed that Vitalik was sort of affiliated with this. Um, Pretty interesting to see. I mean, I think the headlines we're seeing on Twitter are a little bit dramatic relative to what happened. So it's not great, but they got fined $1 million as far as I could tell. They raised 8, so theoretically there's still capital here if they want to continue to build or like pay out ecosystem participants.
Oh, I thought they had to return the 8 and then the 1 million fine on top.
I guess my source could be wrong, but if you look here, they say correction. Apparently, the below means it's a $1 million fine, so 8 million not being returned. So yeah, here's the official press release from the SEC. I definitely recommend folks take a read. It's very interesting. I mean, I definitely think there's something there, right? Like you are having celebrities, influencers, etc., promote these assets as pseudo investments. So I don't think this is at the same level of egregiousness as the SEC saying going after GBTC, right? Like that's much more legitimate. GBTC definitely should be an ETF. It's better for everyone. Here, I actually think like you can steelman the case and say the SEC is actually trying to protect consumers. I don't think they're necessarily going after the right collection, but I do think there are certainly some projects that are basically just pump and dumps and they're sort of like promoting themselves as an investment vehicle. I think we need consistent rules. I don't think enforcement by litigation and action is the way to do it. I think we need clear guidelines so we know what's right and what's not right. But I also do think, like, if I'm steelmanning the SEC's case here, and I think we have to be reasonable and look at their side, if there are people promoting something as a pseudo investment, there probably needs to be some clarity and regulation there. Or at least I understand their position, whether I agree with it or not. So I don't think this is as egregious as what we've seen before, but I would be curious to hear what you guys think.
I mean, I think this is showing that the regulation is wrong. Like they might be following the rules and looking at Howie and looking at the three
Yeah.
criteria. And yes, the people behind Stoner Cats were trying to get hype and talk about why it's going to be a good project, and there's important backing behind it, and that's great. But ultimately, we're talking about an $800 purchase that's letting you watch some cartoons. No one is being protected or harmed. This is all bullshit. Ultimately, yes, they do potentially have to enforce it because that's the way the law is written. And I'm not saying they're doing a mistake in terms of legally how they're going about it, but they could have focused on 100 other things. There's much worse things happening. And this is showing to me that the people who are going against the securities laws by just trying to be very careful around the language they use, but ultimately they are trying to like show something to retail. They're just being very careful around how they do it. Those are worse actors than the ones that are maybe being a little bit careless with a few things, but there's clearly like no bad intention.
Yeah, I think I would like to actually refine my answer more aligned with yours. Like I think they're not necessarily doing the wrong thing because they're actually following their mandate here, but it shows that the regulation is wrong, to your point, Jordy. Because like I just fundamentally agree with you and agree with the premise that like if you've earned your money in a legitimate way and you're not doing anything sort of nefarious, like you should be able to spend it how you want, right? Like if you're on chain and sophisticated enough to know like how to buy a cool cat, you generally like have an understanding like, okay, this could be a rug. This is just pure speculation. This is just fun. Like I'm just looking for another buyer after this, right, to sell to. So I agree. People should entirely be allowed to speculate on whatever they want to speculate on. provided that it's moderately legitimate, which I think this was. So I agree with you. I think the regulations are wrong, but I think this is less egregious from the SEC's point of view than some of the other cases.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying earlier that you think I think they chose like the wrong project to do this on because there's been plenty of cases where like they kind of sell you the world. They're gonna say like, oh, they partnered with some celebrity. They said they're gonna do like giveaways or buybacks, and they just completely rug the protocol, delete the Discord, and like Zach XBT has done a very good job just like tracking these guys down and like finding out where the money's gone, and like this wasn't like a clear rug. I think like in terms of how bad things go, this wasn't near like the worst one they could have done.
We talked about Hex before, and you talked about this guy going around, and Hex is exactly what I'm talking about. You have something that is clearly predatory, an awful product, and they can say, well, no, it doesn't abide by securities law because it's just code and it's out there, therefore it's not a security. And to me, that is 100 times worse than somebody trying to make a cartoon and sell like a pass to it.
So is it in the marketing more so than the fundamentals, right? Because like the fundamentals of Hex and basically like any NFT collection that's just a collection of pictures, right, is basically the same, right? So to you, it comes down to the marketing then of Hex is promoting it as this sort of world class investment that's going to make you rich and earn you a high yield, whereas these NFT collections presumably aren't, or at least in not that degree.
Definitely the marketing matters and even sort of the intention. And it's hard to be very objective about someone's intent, but at least when you prioritize suing one project over many others, it's good to take it into account a little bit. I think the SEC has tried to do like meme viralness. We saw Gensler suing Kim Kardashian and then going on video and telling us how Kim Kardashian did something wrong and he's going after her. Sort of PR, which is very strange for a government agency to be trying to do.
We also saw like the CFTC go after DeFi. Like what, like reasonably, like when do you think all these regulatory clarity, like when do you think we'll actually see like regulatory clarity, like for crypto, like whether it be DeFi, NFTs, or like other crypto assets? Is it reasonable to expect in 2024, like U.S. businesses and U.S. devs can create products that we'll use, or do you think it's going to be, or do you think it's going to take longer than that?
It's definitely going to take longer.
I think it could be quicker than we expect if the election goes all towards the right side, which I think is pretty unlikely. But I think it's like this election is actually pretty important as far as regulation goes. I think if the Democrats, and this is like an apolitical statement, but if the Democrats sweep, I think that we're just going to see continued enforcement and pressure, and that we'll basically head down the path or even go further down it. I think if there was a Republican sweep, I think we would see a lot more innovation regarding crypto, for better or worse. And something like a split outcome, like where we're at, I think is just the status quo continues on. And we have this sort of like uncertainty overhang for the next several years.
I mean, it definitely seems kind of like a geopolitical strategy in the sense that, like, DeFi projects and like an alternative financial system, these things, like, as like at least like a citizen of the Western world with like a very advanced sort of infrastructure built out for that, it doesn't really move the needle much in terms of adding efficiency, but it does add a layer of like, oh, like my citizens like retail savings can be extracted by pretty much anyone in the world with an internet connection. So like from the U.S. perspective, it kind of makes sense that like, okay, fine, we'll sacrifice some innovation on this front, and we'll protect our retail from getting fleeced by these potentially malicious sort of schemes that are going on. Like, what do you guys think about that?
I think you're probably right in your assessment, but I think the government is wrong in its assessment if what you're saying is true, because I think like the power of the stable coin and US dollar denominated yields, whether it's like on-chain treasuries, on-chain equities, on-chain real estate, like these are all very bullish things that would benefit the US's economy drastically more than anyone else's and provide more power to the dollar and the systems we build. So I think you're right in that that's their assumption, but I actually think the right framework here and like taking a responsible approach would be extremely good for the US and our economy and our systems. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear the counterpoint as well.
I think they're aware of what you said, Justin. There's no lack of understanding from the core power of the United States. They're very well of the role of the dollar and how this potentially can help them in certain ways. But Vicky, I have been feeling this so strongly that there is this geopolitical game going on, especially with how they're choosing to go after certain protocols and tactically playing it. I was on a panel today. I'm in Asia, and people are talking on a DeFi. It was a huge DeFi panel with like Rune and Kane, all these people, and the talk was about how let's just wait until the U.S. collapses and the next empire comes down, and maybe the next empire will be bigger. People are looking at like the Roman Empire analogies, and it's telling. I think ultimately the thing that will hopefully bring lighter regulation in the US is going to be demand from actual citizens. And the demand will come when there's good products, prices are doing well, and they feel like they're not allowed to participate properly in an ecosystem that the rest of the world has embraced. So that's why I say, like, I don't think, next 1, 2 years we're going to see something dramatic. But if there's a great improvement in sentiment around DeFi, around some of these products, then eventually they will have to go where the voters are wanting them to go.
Just because it's so topical and related to what we're chatting about now, I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on Adam Cochran's thread on this sort of inside information that CZ has done something very egregious and criminal, possibly related to Russia, and that the US is preparing those charges, and it could be very significant for Binance. I'm curious if you guys have anything you want to share there, if you've heard of anything, or if you think this is just sort of that meme of I'm hearing things in the crypto space, and people are always sort of like tweeting these headlines sort of as bottom signals. But yeah, I'm curious, like also to the regulatory question, Jordy, like do you think going after CZ and going after Binance is more because there's something really there? There's a there, there's fraud, there's crime, something like that, or it's just political? Binance isn't a US company. They don't have a clear headquarters or jurisdiction that they operate in. What are your thoughts?
Definitely feel that there is a very close tracking of what money is going to Russia, what money is going to North Korea, and how to stop those flows happening. And indeed, for North Korea, it's a significant amount of money for their GDP. It is a big deal. Like we don't want Lazarus to keep topping up their yearly budget with
Yeah,
hacking stake.com or whatever they're able to do. These things are serious in that way. I mean, we've seen any time that North Korea comes up, people end up in jail for even going to talk to them, or it's a sensitive topic, and I get it. I was just in Korea last week and seeing how close we are to nukes being able to just go and attack Seoul. People got used to it. They live there, and it's part of life. But when you look at it from fresh eyes, it's a big deal.
I agree. It scares me significantly because like the more software is deployed on chain, the more bugs there will be. All software has bugs. It's just sort of like an inevitability. Hopefully, we have some new innovations around security that can help. But like in my mind, I could see this continuing. Unfortunately, and it sucks, but this continuing to be a greater and greater revenue source for bad actors like North Korea, just because if we think more TVL is coming on chain, if we think more applications are being built, certainly they're going to invest heavily in their hacking infrastructure, right? I mean, they're seeing they can make a lot of money here. They don't have to worry about dealing with any other countries. They could just sort of like run this Lazarus group internally. And so I think it's going to continue and increase, unfortunately. I mean, I hope we can stop it, but I don't know what we can do.
I mean, the best thing we can do is try to get them to spend their hacked money on Friend.Tech shares. Get them excited about some products so that they, instead of using it on nukes, they spend it on e-girl shares and keys. So with that smooth transition, guys, let's move to our next topic.
That was amazing.
So I guess I can talk about this because I think I've been one of the most active people, at least like amongst the four of us on Friend.Tech. And there's a really interesting dynamic going on where, I mean, you see Racer's Keys, who's the founder of Friend.Tech. If you go to the chart, Justin, and you kind of zoom out, you can kind of see like the entire picture of how his keys have performed. Yeah, it's literally up only. And there's like this meta where in the next 6 months, Friend.Tech is going to distribute 100 million points, which will lead to some type of an airdrop. And we just started month two. And the way to get more points is to just hold a bigger portfolio value of keys. So there's like right now, people think it's plus EV or like have a positive expected value to like just buy expensive keys and hold. And Racer, like his keys are up only. Other influencers like Kobe, Justin, not Justin, but like Kobe and Ansem, like their keys are up only. And like literally, because everyone's buying and not selling, like I think it's pretty much impossible for someone to not be up money, at least in terms of paper wealth. Of course, this has to change at some point, and it's kind of similar to like the 3-3 meme when it can when like Ohm happened.
Yeah, I saw that there's a friend score at the bottom. It's friend comma friend. So it's trying to say how much people are holding each other's keys, or what is this friend score over here?
Oh, it has 4%. Yeah, I'm actually not sure what that means, but I think there's like this new like Twitter account that came out of nowhere, and he was able to grow his audience to like 20-30,000 followers by just buying everyone else's keys, and like that way, he basically purchased like popularity that way. And there's like a pretty interesting element happening with Friend.Tech.
So how are you guys keys doing? I still haven't signed up. I guess I'm the odd one out. I'm curious how what you guys who are in the arena are experiencing.
Here's Thicky here, a market cap of 65K, which I think is pretty good, and a key price of 781. So quite expensive to see what you have to deliver, Thicky. Are you providing a lot of value for your chat, or is this just people sort of buying and selling and speculating?
I'm not really talking that much. Yeah, I don't know. The app actually stopped working for me like a week ago, so like I haven't actually been able to log in.
Yeah, I can confirm as a Thicky holder that he has provided zero value to me, but I'll still continue to hold just so I can farm the airdrop.
It's still a bullish chart. We have like a bull flag going on here. So
It's a bull flag for sure. I think the friend score is like of the people that hold you, how many of them do you hold? So that thing that means like 3% of people that hold me, I hold, which is basically I think just one person, and there's 33 holders.
Interesting.
And it looks like you're diamond tier, so you have 9,422 points, which is pretty good. I think I'm just under 2,000. We'll see in a second, but you must have been buying a lot of keys, right?
I've only been buying my own keys at the very beginning. If you
Nice.
see that big,
Very
if you see that big run up, that's me.
awesome.
Justin, let's see where you're at.
I'm a little embarrassed, honestly. I was
Oof.
thinking of having Brad edit this one out or alter the key price possibly. Yeah, I'm at a $7,000 market cap and a key price of 177, and that's all due to me doing buybacks. So you can see here that over the weekend, I just did a little bit of a buyback, and I told everyone if you want to sell, you can dump on me, but I'm just doing this for fun. And people listened and they dumped on me. So peaked at about 250, down to 152. I think I'm going to continue the buybacks potentially because it was fun and people seem to like them. Um, but I'm not doing well, and this is pretty embarrassing.
This is an awful price chart. This is a Burj Khalifa kind of situation here.
There's no TA we have that makes this look bullish. There's no like bull flag or reverse head and shoulders or something.
This is awful. Are you are you talking in the chat? Are you interacting?
Moderately, I mean, I'm saying I'm responding when people write messages. I'm not doing the sort of 3-3 thing that everyone's been talking about. Although I buy shares of friends and people I like. But yeah, and you can see, I mean, my points sort of reflect that. I'm sadly just gold with only 1,700 points, so I don't think I'm going to make out either on my keys doing well or on getting a big airdrop. So I might be the only
Yeah.
person, Taiki, that is losing on Friend.Tech.
But your friend score is 34%. Like that's something to be proud of. Like you're very loyal, Like Thicky's not that loyal, Like Justin's very loyal.
Yeah, you guys sell your Thicky keys and buy Justin keys. Thicky's not talking in the chat. He can't even get the app to work. His friend score is low. He's literally just farming you for airdrops. If you sell his coins and buy my Justin Brand keys, that's the way to have real value. Not financial advice. Don't actually do that.
Justin, I'm sorry to say this to you, but you're that kid in class who's like doing his homework for 10 hours, coming in class prepared and like getting like a 75 on the test. And think he's that kid who doesn't even study the night before. He's like, playing video games all day, doesn't pay attention and just like gets a 95. So that's the
It's
reality.
killing me. It's killing me.
Taiki, how about you? Okay, this is respectable. This is healthy. This is okay.
Oh, there you
Wow.
go.
This is a great pattern going on here. So your price is $600. So for any listeners out there that want to grab a Taiki key for $600, and I'm probably gonna get sued by the CFTC for even mentioning that now. Um, are you providing value, Taiki?
Yeah, I'm actually like posting there like every day. Like I don't really know how to create value. Like I don't really promise anything, but I'm like just giving my takes on how I'm playing Friend.Tech. Because I downloaded the app like day one or day two. I deposited like zero point 0.1 ETH, and now like my portfolio value is like 13 ETH or something, which is like pretty insane. And I've been playing around with the app a lot, and I think there's like this meta where, yeah, like you're being like rewarded for just buying keys early and like just holding, just because there's little reasons to bridge out of the application because of the airdrop feature. And every day like new people are entering, and I think manifold trading is going to implement like the anti-bot features that like, or the anti-sniping bot features that you were afraid of. And I think that can onboard like bigger profile people. And I think that like once that happens, that can be like reach like the first top. Maybe like when Machi Big Brother like onboards and like sweeps everyone, maybe like that's like the end of like the first peak cycle or hype cycle. But I think any dip that happens for keys like should be bought. I think leading up to the airdrop.
I mean, I have seen some big guys. I saw High Six Cap was saying that he's made keys now, and that and then the next bull market he's going to be sharing charts and sharing some stuff there. But I'm curious, Taiki. I mean, out of all of us, I would say you have the most experience with this type of stuff because I remember you were very close on some of the games that were going on, the Jewel and some of those early similar games, right? We were kind of like farming points and play to earn stuff. Do you see some similarities with that, and is that experience helping you with getting this kind of return?
Yeah, I mean, I just like try to be on chain all the time and try to experiment with like new things. Like Jewel, like I just like bridged to Harmony when no one did, and like I just like randomly farmed like two dexes, and like one of them just happened to be DeFi Kingdoms. And the game didn't really end up working, but it was like so like crazy. It had like a crazy run up like $20 or something. And I think you just have to understand like this for what it is. Like, yes, it has a lot of potential. Social tokens kind of make sense. Creators are making a bunch of money. Like if you just like look at it from like a rational perspective, it is technically like a negative sum game where you have to pay 10% fees to go in and out. Right now, things are only going up because of the airdrop farming program. And I think the way I view it is, I think in the first couple of months, the first 1 to 3 months of the airdrop campaign, people are just going to be like buying and holding keys to maximize their airdrop points. But as more TVL enters the system, as we near the end of the airdrop program, like month 4, 5, 6, I think there's gonna be less incentive to hold these keys, and I think we're gonna start to see like boom bust cycles. But I think anyone that's still paying attention to crypto, like I think it makes sense to like just at least try it out. Um, I think it's definitely like something with potential. And like my mental model is like just farm this as much as possible, and when the token comes out, I'll like probably just dump it into Ether or something like into the hype.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you've gone through enough market cycles that you're probably thinking, okay, at some point, I do need to exit. It's not going to be up only forever. So I'm sure you have it in your mind, and I'm sure our audience will be curious when that happens in the future. But let's move to our last segment. Pasta of the week is the one that we'd be doing last week, but some of our viewers have specifically requested that we do another Degen of the week. That was an early favorite that we might need to bring back. So with that, Justin, have you done anything DGen lately?
I think you already saw it in the chat. So I did over the weekend. I announced to my Friend.Tech share or key holders, excuse me, that I was doing a 1 ETH buyback of my keys. At the time, this was and still kind of is a huge buyback. I think my keys were at like 0.03, embarrassingly enough, 0.02. So I don't know how many shares of myself I have now, or keys, but I think something like 30, 35. Unfortunately, the previous holders all dumped on me, and that's totally cool. That's sort of why I did it, to give them that option. But that was my DGen play of the week. So I like Taiki's line of you always got to bet on yourself, and that's what I'm doing here.
Thicky, have you DGened lately?
One could call this degen, others could call it schizo, but yeah, I've been going through like hundreds of documents of FTX bankruptcy case proceedings. And as soon as a new entry pops up, I get like alerts in the middle of the night that wake me up, and I just go on my phone and then just read through all these documents to make sure that I'm not missing any important details. But yeah, like important stuff like, how much they can sell, in what manner they're going to sell, when they have to provide notice to the courts to sell, that kind of stuff, just so I can, properly risk manage my short positions that I've taken on.
That's pretty degen. I mean, having phone alerts for FTX doxed dropping.
It's absolutely brilliant, right? Like Thicky's in there making the market efficient, right? He's fulfilling the efficient market hypothesis because who else is doing this? Everyone, there's so many, the delays in crypto are insane from when news breaks to when the price is impacted, and that's because of people like Thicky. So I think it's brilliant.
Doing my duty.
This is a very solid, very very solid degen play. Takey, are you going to be able to match up to that?
No, I don't think I can compete with the Asian quant here. But what I've been doing is I've just been reinvesting everything into my Friend.Tech key. Not buying my own keys, but like I've just been like grinding. Like I've been like tracking like new like launches, as in like when it comes to like new accounts making keys, trying to buy keys early without using like sniping bots. Like one time, like I just like swept like this like new alt account that I thought was like someone's alt account, and I'm like just buying and holding these keys. Like I'm like everything I make on Friend.Tech, I'm just gonna reinvest.
So there's actual speculation now on alt accounts joining and trying to buy the keys of somebody because they might be somebody else.
Yeah. So like I found this account. It was called like I'm not gonna share what it's called, but people started buying it, and I was like why are people buying this? And then I went to like the person's Twitter, and the mutual followers were like Hasaka, CL, Zach XBT, like all these like big names. I'm like, okay, like this is for sure someone's alt account. So I bought these keys at like 0.01, and like now like six of them, and now it's like 0.4, and now I'm like the top holder. So I have to figure out like how am I going to sell this thing. But it's kind of cool because with Friend.Tech, like exactly like who owns what supply. So there's like everything's like very transparent, right? Like when it comes to like shitcoining and like altcoining, like you never really know who holds what and where and like how much and like when they're gonna dump. But at least with Friend.Tech, it's like, oh yeah, Taiki holds 6 keys of this person. Like if he sells, then the price will dump like 20% or something. So I think that's kind of like wholesome.
For the audience, I think Taiki and Thicky's keys, that all of this bullishness has already been priced in by the market. I think the move here is to convert those keys to Justin Bram keys. Not financial advice, but I have no bullishness priced in right now.
Never buy the laggard, only double down on winners. That's
Winners average winners.
You're right.
Winners
That's
average
true.
winners.
All right, well, Justin, I mean, key buybacks, I think is a solid 2 out of 10. I'm sorry to say. Taiki, okay, buying alt account, based on potential followers, it's like a 4 out of 10. And Thicky, I think you're far and away winning Degen of the week. Although I have to say, I have met one Degen this week who possibly surpasses you. So I had an amazing encounter here in Singapore at the conference.
Oh my god.
My favorite person of the moment, Mr. Grachev, has hinted that he may indeed, in the next week or two, appear on Steady Lads, and this will be his debut. So if you in the chat can hound him on Twitter and make sure you encourage him, I think we have a very healthy shot now of getting him on very soon. That'll that'll be a very exciting episode that should bring a lot of new attention to our podcast. So looking forward to that.
How is he in person? Is he as intimidating like in real life as he is in his online persona?
He has this like goofy movement. He has like a very casual demeanor. Clearly, he's not scared of anything and anyone, and looking forward to sharing it with our audience hopefully soon. So if you guys are excited by that, make sure that you show some support on Twitter, and I think we can get him on. So we'll leave it there for this week. Keep steady, lads, and talk to you soon.